Hello, and welcome back to the video lecture series for Introduction to the Art of Programming using Scala. In this video, we're going to be doing the analysis of our project. We're going to follow a project throughout the rest of, in some ways, the book. In this case, though, the book goes through and looks at a painting program, and for the online videos, I'm going to use a somewhat different program to look at kind of as my large-scale project. There are a number of reasons for this. One is to give students an extra project to look at. I know in the past, if students only see one thing that's large, that's developed in code, they only understand that one thing, and that can be very problematic. So seeing more alternatives is good. Also, even if I were to rewrite the same paint program on these videos, I would produce different code. And so I don't want there to be any confusion between the code that I produce in the videos and the code that I write in the book. Hopefully you've seen by this point that there are many, many ways to solve any given problem, and that's true even for small problems. Once you get to a large project, the number of approaches proliferates. And also, in some ways, because I don't exactly have a customer, the feature set that I would add could even be different. So we're going to work on doing the analysis of an electronic classroom type of program. The idea here is this should be a program that students can log into and instructors can log into, and the students should be able to do things like take quizzes in it, and the instructors should be able to make quizzes. And it should be able to list out, so students might use the same program in different classes over multiple semesters, and so there should be some organization in there to keep track of things. So that's the goal of this project, but that's very loosely stated. So the first step in the software lifecycle is the analysis phase, and what the analysis phase does is you are really just defining what the problem is that you're going to solve. So for example, if your problem has a GUI, one of the things you definitely want to do is lay out what the window is going to look like. For any problem, whether or not it has a GUI, you want to figure out what it is that the user is going to do when they sit down to interact with the program. And that is particularly where these UML use case diagrams come in. So UML stands for the Unified Modeling Language, and a use case diagram is one of the diagrams that are part of the UML set, and it is the primary diagram that is aimed at doing analysis, to actually flesh out what your program is going to do. And so I am going to have us draw a use case diagram. And I'm using a little tool here called Creately. I have it pushed off to the top, but this is just happening in a browser. It's quite possible that you will not use Creately. That is fine. One of the things about UML is whiteboard friendly, which means that you're probably going to do your UML on paper or on whiteboards. Every element that is in it is highly drawable by hand, and so you don't necessarily have to have software like this. If you're going to do very elaborate diagrams, it is nice to have software so that you can easily go back and edit things. But the goals of UML, in this case, we want to do an analysis, but why would I use UML for it? The UML allows me to communicate things in a way that is much less verbose than just writing out words, and it's much easier for people to look at it and understand what's going on. So turns out that this piece of software that we're thinking of developing is actually going to kind of have two separate pieces of software in it. You have a server which stores all the data and hands it out to clients, and then clients which actually interact with the user, and those two have to connect to one another over a network. I'm just going to do the use case for the client here. And so I take one of our elements that goes in these diagrams, a system, except our system here is called the client, and I'll make the client a lot bigger in here. So You'll notice there aren't very many things you can put inside of a use case diagram. We're going to use 3 of them. 2 of them are the same. They're just different ways of drawing it. The system is just a box that everything that's inside of the box represents that particular piece of the software that you are writing. So I want to lay out things for my client. The second element, in addition to the system, would be actors. So actors are entities outside of the system that can interact with the system in some way. Now, of course, the most obvious actors are the users. So in this case, the student is a very obvious actor for us to have. Because of the way the software is going to work, the instructor really should be treated as a separate actor, because when you log into the software and you start using it, the instructor is going to have very different options from what the student has. Some of the options will be shared, and we can show that in this use case diagram, but a lot of the options are going to be different. Now, it's also possible for there to be actors that are not actually humans. Because this box represents our client software, any type of instruction that it gets that's coming from outside of it as a system is typically represented as coming from an actor. So in the case of a client-server application, a lot of times you can represent the other side of the network connection as an actor. So your client might actually receive information from the server that causes it to do different things. And really what we were trying to do here is lay out all the different things that we can do, all the different ways in which we use this software. Sorry, I like to save every so often. So big box for the system, little stick figures for our actors. Obviously you can draw your actors in other ways. I like the stick figures just because they are exactly what I'm going to draw on a whiteboard if I do this. And then the third and last element of these diagrams is the use case. So this is something you can do in the system. Well, I've already mentioned several times, one of the things that I can do in this system, whether I am the student or the instructor, is I need to be able to log in. So I'm just going to make a little use case bubble here for logging in. And then I said that the student can do this, and so can the instructor. So I'm going to click on here, and I am going to say that there is an association between the student and the login, and there is also an association between the instructor and the login. So both of those two can log in. If you can log in, typically you can also log out. So that's another use case. In some ways these are very simple use cases. What are some more interesting use cases? So, well, we talked about the fact that why would students log in? Students log in, maybe they are logging in to get their grades. And maybe they are logging in to take a quiz. And those are the types of things that students might do in this system. And so I'm going to draw use cases for them. And I am going to associate the student with these use cases. Okay. The instructor does not take quizzes and is generally not interested, does not going to have the same interface for getting quizzes. The instructor is going to have some different use cases for things like making a quiz or editing a quiz. How about, I'll actually make 2 of those. Create quiz. would be one use case, because I can see that being a particular usage. I can see editing a quiz as another usage. And I can see entering grades. And we'll just call it edit grades as another usage. Okay, these are all things that the instructor can do, and these are activities that are not allowed for the basic student. Now, of course, if you were doing this on a whiteboard, you would just draw simple lines between these things, and you wouldn't worry about much of the details of this. There is also, okay, and then maybe what does the server have the ability to do? So maybe while one person is logged on, so a student is logged on someplace, an instructor elsewhere changes something that's associated with a class, or maybe adds in a completely new class. So I'm just going to put a very generic update information that really should be fleshed out, but that's not in the scope of this video. We're not going to worry about it. Okay, so that is something that the server might tell the client to do, is to update some piece of information in there. There are some other types of arrows that you should be made aware of, two in particular. And so one type of arrow says that when you do something, you are always going to have some sub-activity associated with it. So for example, something that might happen in a number of different places is that you want to authenticate the user. Okay, you want the software to go through the process of making sure that the user is correct, which might have them typing in an extra password or doing whatever. And so, for example, when you log in, this is definitely one step that is going to require authenticating the user. And so I'm going to use an include arrow. So the login step includes the act of authenticating the user. To demonstrate the other one, I will put another use case up here for my student. In addition to taking quizzes, let's have the ability to take a test. Okay. And of course, taking a test winds up being very much like taking a quiz in here. And because these two are so similar, we're actually going to have a whole bunch of things that have a certain nature like this. And it's nice to demonstrate that in the use case diagram. And what we can say is I think perform course activity. So you're doing one of the activities that's associated with the class, and taking quizzes is one of these, and taking a test is one of these, and there would be others, to do an exercise or to write a little coding sample or something like that. Those would all fall under here. So another arrow type is the extends. I'll move things around so that's a little bit more visible. So taking quizzes and taking tests both extend the more general activity of performing a course activity. So hopefully this gives you some idea of how you can use the use case diagram. Now, you're laying out the main things that the user should be able to do. In some ways, you're laying out all of the options that you have. One thing about doing this is you don't want to get stuck by trying to take it too far. Okay? You need to know when to stop. There's a term called paralysis by analysis, and it can actually apply both to analysis and to the next step in the process called design. And when you have paralysis by analysis, you spend so much time trying to make sure that you have every little bubble and that every little thing is connected up and that you understand absolutely everything the software is going to do that you never move on to the next phase. And especially as a novice, you need to avoid this, because as a novice, you don't have the experience to take this step all that far. You should work on doing it because it will help you to see what it is that you're missing. So over time, doing this will help you to improve your overall capabilities. But you need to realize that at a certain point, you're not getting any more benefit from trying to come up with more bubbles or anything. You're slowing down, and you should just stop. And you will come back and revisit this later after you have the software up and running. You'll go, oh, hey, I didn't realize I was going to need an option for blank. And then you could, effectively, especially if you were doing it in software, add it to your use case diagram, add that feature in how it's going to go into your design, and then it can go into your implementation. So that's it for this video. We'll come back next time and we'll do some design work.